And hello, welcome to the assembly of the 70S Dellichord either ready-to-assemble kit, or if you've bought a ready-to-paint kit, you'll now know how to disassemble it and paint it, because here's the instructions of how to reassemble it, I guess. If you've built the enclosure from scratch, then this is how you get some sound out of it. So all the parts are included, obviously, a bunch of screws. The first step and note to remember is that you absolutely need to have the washer under the head of the self-tapping screw to screw the crossover / terminal assembly into the rear panel of the box. This is critical. It's critical because if you don't put the washer in there, the screw will potentially, the tip of it will go through the back of the enclosure. That's what all the gesticulation is about. It's important. I mean, it's going to sort of ruin the finish. So we're putting down some foam because obviously once we mount the terminal assembly, the terminals do sit proud of the exterior side of the rear baffle. So you need to put them up on something, and we just happen to have some foam sitting there because we're about to put that foam inside the box. So let's use that. So the terminal assembly will literally go into the box and be screwed down. The location of it, as we'll show shortly, is decided by the heads of the T-nuts that the crossover board is screwed through. You should also note that we supply a short length of door seal, basically gasket material, self-adhesive, which you can apply as we've done beforehand. We don't apply it. You can see it there as a black stripe. You need to work your way around that one rogue locating T-nut head because there's very little clearance between that T-nut head and the aperture. So you will see the door sealant if you're not careful to keep it tight. Pre-fit it into the rear and have a look and you'll see what I mean. Or if you have a look inside the enclosure at where the T-nut head clearance rebate is, you'll see it's only about 4 or 5 mil from the edge of the aperture. You don't actually need that door sealant. It's a very, very good fit. You do it up tight, and obviously we're using just a spare rear panel here so you can actually see how to screw it up. Don't use any power tools, please. Just screw it up and screw it up sort of just tight with a Phillips screwdriver. I personally think that on the basis you can remove the crossover board anyhow from that panel, that really using some spare leftover black sealant that you attached the damping pads with would be a good idea, rather than using the door sealant. But if you want to make the whole thing removable for whatever reason, certainly if you're assembling the box, you haven't yet decided what you want to do about the paint, finishing, staining, what have you, you can assemble it using the screws and the door sealant, and you can remove it all so that you can paint the box properly with a terminal crossover assembly out later, which I think is the way to do it. Because my guess is that a lot of people will want to listen to the loudspeaker now and paint it later, which means they'll never paint it, but anyhow. So it's a bit fiddly to get in there. I would use this is where on the list we say you need a torch. A torch would be handy perhaps, or your phone sitting inside the box with its light on. And then you can see what you're doing. And it's as simple as that. I mean, not complicated. Obviously, I very carefully applied that door seal so it doesn't show up in the aperture. And even if it does, it'll still seal, unless you missed it completely. Next step is to put the foam inside the box. Those foams the big fat bits go from the center at the top across down one side and to the center at the bottom, joining under where the port fits in. That's what we're trying to do there. And it doesn't need any glue or anything to hold itself in there. It will hold, it's got enough tension on its right size so it just stays put. And the second one, it's good foam, does the job, it's critical, please don't leave it out. For that matter, putting more in is not a good thing. The tuning of the base alignment has been completed with that amount of foam in it, and that's the right amount. You just fiddle it, move it around, jiggle it about, tug it, and you'll eventually get it sitting nice and flat against the sides. Now, for purpose of demonstration, I'm putting the third piece in as well, but in reality that will need to come out so that you can connect the drive unit terminals to the crossover board, which frankly is the only tricky job in this whole assembly. So in reality, I mean, you could check fit that foam, but you're going to take it back out. So now beware that now that the terminals are fitted, of course they're proud from the rear, so we need something to stop them from taking all of the load when you lay it on its back. Now you could use more foam, and I just used the foam, but you'd have 2 other pieces of foam at this stage, but whatever. Now I'm whacking the port in, and it just goes in like that, but in reality I wouldn't have put it in at this stage. It's probably handier to be able to shine a torch through the port hole when you're trying to connect these very tight fitting terminals up. So for the purpose of demonstration here, we're going to use a spare crossover and show you how these connect up, because there's no trick to it, but other than the fact that, by the way, the positive terminals are a larger terminal, the negative terminals are a smaller terminal, and the smaller ones are cows to put on, I'll admit. Once they're on, that's the main thing. A bit of practice dry run like this is actually not a bad idea, so that you can get a feel for how the terminals feel when you're wobbling them to get them to go on. The smaller ones, really are a bit of a hooer. And that's what you'll be doing. You'll be having a look to see what the orientation of the connector is and making sure that you get it lined up. Well, like I say, I would do do a practice run just as I've done there, so that you know how it feels. So when you've got your arm inside the box, it's easier. So I guess it's possible you could put at least the tweeter in its aperture, pull the cables back out through the woofer hole, and connect them with the crossover assembly loose before you screw it to the rear panel, which might be easier, but in reality that's certainly not how we do it at the factory, because it's really nothing more than having a bit of a feel for it, and it's a knack, and once you've done it 3 times you're right. The main thing is to get them on the right terminals. This is critical. So the HF terminals are for the high frequency driver, the tweeter, the one that I'm holding right now. If you get that wrong, you will destroy the tweeter. If you connect the LF, the low frequency circuit, to the HF driver, the tweeter, the driver I'm fitting now, you will blow it up immediately. So that's probably the only tricky bit in the whole job, other than getting the terminals on, is to just make sure that the tweeter, the small driver, the HF driver, high frequency driver, goes to the HF terminals. You can't get them reverse polarity because they're different side connectors. The bigger connector goes to HF plus and the smaller connector to HF negative, and then in the case of the base unit that we're about to install, it goes to LF plus and LF negative. Now these screws, don't get anywhere near a tool until you've got these screws screwed in at least 4 or 5 turns. They should go in very easily. You do need to give them a little bit of a wobble just to find the thread, and maybe spin them backwards before you wind them in, just so you can feel a little click and it finds the thread, and then you wind it in. An old trick, and then do them up sort of even pressure, like you're torquing a cylinder head down or something. Not really, it's not that critical. Just don't do them up very tight. They simply don't need to be super tight. If we're talking Newton meters, we'd be talking 3, maybe 4 or something, or 8. Very tiny amounts of torque. And you can always just check the torque later, which they may loosen a touch as the gasket compresses down over time. But Base unit, same thing. The trickiest bit here is going to be plugging them in, but I have done this a lot, so I've got the touch. So we're doing that. Once we get those mongrels plugged in, we then put the bit of foam back over the crossover, and of course do it in such a way that it holds the wires down to one side so that they don't rattle against the box or what have you. Drop the driver in, or carefully place it in, and same thing when putting the screws in. Just get them to find their thread. T-nuts are great, as in the mating part with the thread in it, but you need to, like I say, possibly just turn them backwards, counterclockwise a touch, just to get them to go tick, and then you can screw forwards and they'll fall into the threads. Wobble them around a little bit, whatever you need to do, but do get all four started before you start screwing them in with your Allen key or your driver tool, as we're using here. Once again, no necessity for enormous amounts of torque. They will be fine. I mean, they're going to be tight, right? But just don't lean on them. It's a tiny little 4mm screw. So you've basically built yourself a box. The final thing to do is put the badge on. The badge basically positions halfway between the edge of the flange of the port and the inside edge of the enclosure of that window framing section. You can use a piece of tape to give you a straight edge to work to. How should I put it? You could. I mean, we don't want to put a pencil mark on the box, right? So I'm going to put the pencil mark on the tape as to where it is. I would decide on where you want it to sit and just make sure it's the same on both boxes. Plus or minus 5mm isn't going to be critical, and obviously not going to affect the sound quality. The main thing is to get that tape there parallel. I think we had about a 7mm overlap on the day over the side of the box, so that, just so it wasn't the full 25mm in from the edge that the thickness of the tape is, if it's 25mm tape, which I think it is. So the badge is 50mm long, the box is 290mm wide. Take that off, that's 240 divided by 2, 120. So you're going to get the edge of where the badge is, it's going to be 120 in mil from each side. And make two little marks on the tape. Grab your badge. Easiest way to do it is very carefully use a carton knife, craft knife, to pick it up with, because you use your fingers, you ruin the adhesive. And position it one corner, line it up, and gently squeeze it on. If you don't press it too hard, you can probably get it off again. Now we give you 4 badges, so you can put it on and use another pair later when you paint them, perhaps. And there you go, voila, done. 70S Dellichords assembled and complete.